Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Linda Smith, and I am the Director of the Early Childhood Initiative here at the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C. For those of you who don't know us, we are a Washington, D.C. based think tank that tries to take the best ideas from both sides of the aisle to propose solutions to the nation's most pressing problems. Of course, early childhood and childcare is certainly makes that top 10 list of pressing problems for this country. Today, we're going to do the last in a three-part series on the early Head Start childcare partnerships. And today, I think, is the most important of the three that we've done, in that we are bringing people from the local level to talk to us about their experiences in what happened during the pandemic and sort of what their successes have been over the last few years with managing the partnerships. With me today is Chantel Meek, who is the professor of practice and founding director for the Children's Equity Project at Arizona State University, and Yvette Sanchez Fuentes, who is the vice president of national policy for Early Start in Chicago. And both of them, I have to say, were partners in crime in the establishment of the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Program during the initial years of the Obama administration, when we set this up, actually. And I have to give a shout out to Shannon Rudisa, who was our other partner in this, who worked really hard with all of the staff at HHS to make this program happen. So what I want to do now is basically turn this over to Chantel, who's going to give you a little bit of an overview, and then we will go to some slides, and then we'll talk to our, what I call, real experts from the ground who have been doing this work. So Chantel, it's over to you.
Thank you, Linda. Great to be with you all today in this third part of our series on the partnership. So if we can pull up the slide deck, that'd be great. We can jump in. We're just going to provide a little bit of an overview for those of you who might be newer to the partnerships on what the partnerships are, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Eric Boucher, to walk us through brief 3 in the 3-part series that kind of digs into local examples from the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships. And then after that, so we can go to the next slide. I'm going over the agenda. We'll have a panel discussion. So to start, the reason why, and I think the driving force behind wanting to kind of push the partnerships and kind of show all of the good work that they do, is because we see it as one really important and clear existing mechanism to really replicate the Head Start model, to make sure and to move toward ensuring that all kids have a consistently high quality experience, no matter what door they go through, no matter what dollars are funding that particular slot, that we have a consistent level of quality care across the board. And how we can start to think about, yes, Head Start is a specific program. It is also a model, right, that could be replicated, and we could kind of think about expanding that and then replicating the model within pre-K, within childcare, within other early care and education settings, and on forward. Next slide, please. So why the Head Start model? I think most of the folks on this call probably know why the Head Start model, but just to give a little bit of kind of the high level points, the Head Start and Early Head Start model, as we know, is codified into the Head Start program performance standards, and part of that model includes all of the things that you see here on this slide, right? We see smaller group sizes and ratios than you have in many state licensing systems for childcare. We have mental health supports and infant and early childhood mental health consultation that is a core part of the model and a requirement to ensure families have access. So we have developmental and behavioral and health screenings. We have nutritious meals and family style eating that is part of the model. We know we have job embedded coaching, professional development. And the most important piece here, perhaps this should have been the first bullet, really, it's a really strong kind of family-centered, community-centered model, right? Where families have a leadership role. They have decision making. There is not only support for their organizing and advocacy and supporting their child's development, but support for them as people, right? In terms of whatever they might need, whether that is connections to job training, whether that's connections to housing assistance, or to get a driver's license, or to, whatever really the need is. Really ensuring that the Head Start program and the Head Start model is really about using those community connections to ensure that families have what they need, whatever that is. We know that there's also tribal and migrant seasonal Head Start programs that are specific to those communities and have kind of the cultural and linguistic responsive supports embedded as part of the model. We know that full inclusion of kids with disabilities, which unfortunately we do not see in many pre-K programs across the country, in many childcare programs across the country. This is a core part of the Head Start model that predates even early childhood special ed programs as part of the IDEA law. We know that in the last round, the performance standards, bilingual supports for dual language learners was also codified into that regulation and into the model, so that if there is a certain proportion of kids who share the same home language that is not English, there's a requirement for bilingual staff, for exposure and instruction in the home language, and so on. Many of us have heard the data on suspension and expulsion of young children and harsh discipline of young children, and how that has really detrimental outcomes down the road, and how it can be really damaging to the adult-child relationship, to the child's association with school, to the child's experience with learning, to the family's experience overall. And part of that is also codified into the Head Start model and the Head Start standards to limit that. So next slide, please. So what are the partnerships? The partnerships were established, as Linda mentioned, during the Obama administration to really increase access to high quality care for infants and toddlers. They're competitive grant programs that fund a partnership between early Head Start grantees and childcare partners in the community. Any licensed childcare partner in the community, center-based family childcare, etc. So the childcare partners agree to meet the early Head Start standards, but they are resourced to do so, right? They get funding to do so, to meet those standards. They get support to do so, and they provide full day, full year, high quality care to more infants and toddlers in the community. They reached over nearly 33,000 kids in 2021, and Congress has kind of slowly and steadily increased funding over the last decade to get us to where we are today. Next slide, please. So the other part that we think is really important to bring up about the early Head Start childcare partnerships is that it is not just the children who are being directly funded, those slots that are being directly funded that benefit. There is a ripple effect, as we call it, that happens, so that children beyond those that are directly funded by the program are benefiting. What that means is if you're a childcare program and you're a partner in the early Head Start childcare partnership, you might get mental health consultation or social emotional training and coaching, right, as part of that partnership. But that might be for the whole program, all of the teachers in that childcare program, right? And so all of the teachers go on having that training, having that capacity built, not just this school year, but the next school year and the next school year, right? If there are facility changes, if there's a new playground, right, that's going to benefit all of the children in that program, not just the individual children who are funded by that particular slot. And so there are lots of examples of this, of how it goes beyond the impact on the child and family who's in that particular slot to benefit kind of the community more broadly. And in our report, we put some, the grantees that we talked to estimated how many additional children beyond those who are funded were impacted. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Eric Boucher, who did a lot of the work on this third brief and talked to lots of grantees and was one himself back in the day. So Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Meek. My name is Dr. Eric Boucher. I'm an assistant research professor of early childhood policy at the Children's Equity Project at Arizona State University. I have the pleasure of working with Chantel and a group of amazing colleagues looking at equity for young children and families. I also supported an early Head Start childcare partnership back in the day when they first came out. I was working at a local childcare program that benefited from that grant. And I remember just how powerful that funding and those resources were for the families to be able to access comprehensive education, health, nutrition, and engagement services, but also how powerful those funding and resources were for the teachers to go and attain a child development associate, to participate in professional learning, to have the materials and toys and supplies they needed to really develop young children's lifelong skills. And so that story is not mine alone. There are many, many stories of successes of childcare partnerships across the nation. You're going to hear from several success stories today. And we've highlighted some of them in our most recent brief, the spotlight on EHS-CCP grantees during the pandemic. So to start, in 2019, the Bipartisan Policy Center interviewed several EHS-CCP grantees to better understand the impacts and lessons learned from the unique grant program. The profiles demonstrated that EHS-CCPs helped boost the quality of care for infants and toddlers in many ways, including increasing the credentials and the professional development and coaching access for teachers and the early childhood workforce. It improved the physical program structure and environments, and ensured children and families had access to an array of comprehensive services, like developmental screenings, connections to health care and dental care, and mental health support. Next slide. Fast forward to 2022, in our most recent report, the Children's Equity Project, in partnership with the Bipartisan Policy Center and Start Early, we revisited 5 of those EHS-CCP grantees from that 2019 report. And we also talked with 5 additional grantees to really explore the challenges and the successes that they experienced specifically during the pandemic. We talked with 10 grantees featured in this report that represent a diverse combination of states, local cities, nonprofit agencies, all delivering EHS-CCP services to a total of 2,257 children and their families through 136 childcare partners across 7 states, and with an estimated ripple effect touching more than 5,300 children and families indirectly across communities. And as you can see on the slide, many counties and local communities are represented in the stories that we told in this recent brief. Next slide. The report really showcases the highlights of the partnership funding in several communities. It draws lessons learned and makes recommendations for how we might expand early Head Start childcare partnerships to increase access for more children and families and to support the workforce across communities. We'd like to share some of the common themes among these 10 grantees that we talked with, as they provided comprehensive, holistic education, health, and family-centered services for children and families in their local communities during the pandemic. And you might notice as we're going through some of these themes that they include many of the same benefits that we saw Head Start and early Head Start grantees also provide during the pandemic, and that's correct. And the key point we want to make here is that during this tumultuous time, the EHS-CCP served as an important mechanism in supporting families and stabilizing local childcare providers over the course of the past 2 years, and even beyond the original function of the EHS-CCP. So as you can imagine, with the EHS-CCP model, there's a centralized lead organization and a network of community resources. And so because of that, the EHS-CCP partnerships provided local childcare providers with the funding and the resources necessary to connect families and providers with essential resources and services, modify settings to accommodate safer learning spaces and play spaces, provided up-to-date health and safety guidance related to the pandemic, and assisted providers in accessing some of those stabilization funds that were available through federal relief dollars. So in the 2022 report, we focus our attention on 3 specific facets of the role of the EHS-CCP program, 3 major dimensions. The pandemic response and recovery for the childcare system stabilization, workforce retention and recruitment, and expanded access to comprehensive services and supports, including mental health services for children, for families, and for the workforce. So next slide, let's share a couple of the highlights from these 10 grantees from the 2022 report. The first piece that was critically important as part of the pandemic recovery and response was really the resources and technical assistance and professional development support that those local childcare providers had to be able to address things like masking with young children or accessing tests for COVID or getting families supplies that they needed like diapers and toilet paper and food to ensure that families' well-being was also taken care of during the pandemic. So a couple of highlights we'd like to note from the grantees that we talked with. The EHS-CCP funding provided the stable source of income, of support to keep providers open during the pandemic. Funding allowed sites to improve their facilities to meet health and safety guidelines, to allow for better physical distancing among children and staff. Programs invested in improved airflow, access to air filtration systems, as well as disinfecting supplies, materials that we know providers needed over the past 2 years to keep safe, healthy, nurturing environments for young children. Among the grantees that we talked to, we also noted that many of them assisted providers to actually apply for and receive relief funding, creating another stable source of income to keep their doors open over the past few years. Many of the providers we spoke with also leveraged health and mental health staff through the network that they already had as a Head Start or Early Head Start grantee, and provided PD, coaching, and technical assistance directly to childcare providers in their local communities. And next slide. We know that the EHS-CCP can also be one avenue to really increase compensation, wages, and professional support for the workforce, something that's on the mind of many early childhood providers, especially as federal pandemic relief funds end in September and then start to sunset by next year. The EHS-CCP grantees that we talked with supported nearly 570 early childhood teaching staff to achieve their child development associate or an early childhood degree. They all increased staff wages, offered retention incentives, and also created pipelines for career advancement, which not only supported those who were working in the EHS-CCP programs, but also teachers who weren't part of the EHS-CCP program, but still worked in that local childcare site could benefit from participating in those educational resources. Next slide. And another critical highlight that we want to bring up is just how important those comprehensive services were in helping children, families, and the early childhood workforce during the pandemic, specifically health and mental health resources. So the grantees that we talked with prioritized access to mental health consultants, not just for children and families to be able to have the resources they needed to survive and thrive during the pandemic, but also for the early childhood workforce, providing coaching and mental health services directly to teachers, creating networks where they provided professional development or training cohorts to help build the skills of teachers in working with children during the pandemic and addressing those mental health needs. The providers that we spoke with also connected staff and parents with health and community-based resources, which helped develop the individual, which helped address the individual needs of families through collaborative parent support networks. And importantly, as we mentioned before, the EHS-CCP is an important mechanism that funds and resources local childcare providers with the materials and the services and the support they need to provide comprehensive, quality infant and toddler care in their local communities. And so we're excited to hear from several of our grantees that we spoke with about what that looked like and what it really meant for young children and families. So it's my pleasure to turn it back to Dr. Chantel Meek and Yvette Sanchez for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And I think I think we hand it to Linda here to do some introductions for our panel, right? You're muted.
Thank you, Chantel and Eric, for the briefing. That was excellent and set the stage for what I think is going to be a fascinating conversation with our 5 panelists. What we're going to do next is actually ask each of the 5 to give us a brief introduction, description of their project, the highlights of it, how it works, and then a couple of points that they would like to share with everyone in terms of what it has accomplished in their communities. The first panelist that I want to introduce today is Dawn Fuser, who is the Executive Director and Principal Investigator of the Ohio State University Child Care Program and Early Head Start Partnership Program. Dawn has been working on this for over 30 years, has a lot of background and experience with both state policy making as well as his work with Head Start and Early Head Start. So we're going to post everyone's bios in the chat. So if you want to know more about Dawn, but let me say that I did a visit to Ohio last year, and I was so impressed with what Dawn was doing with this program. Dawn, do you want to share your experiences with our audience?
In the program as well. And thank you, Linda, for all the work that the Bipartisan Policy Center does in advocating for, this program and really keeping that positive shining light on the early Head Start childcare programs, because all of us that are grantees that, are fortunate enough to have these types of grants see the good things that could happen in communities with that kind of work. I think, starting off with the Ohio State University, obviously we're part of a higher education situation here, and actually that can work in our benefit, which it really does, because it gives us access to lots of services that we don't necessarily have to pay for. And it's unique in the sense that we only have 13 staff members that operate our program, and we're serving 263 children. We have 15 childcare partnerships, 11 family childcare homes, 30 home-based services, and 25 pregnant women that we are serving. So we've been fortunate enough. So based on that expansion, when we wrote the initial grant, what we wanted to do was leverage the current services that are already being provided in our community. So instead of replicating or duplicating those services, when we put the grant together, it was, these things are already being done. Health services, let's say, as an example, were already being provided for some of our families. Why not tap in and leverage those services, which we did. So right now our program has 23 plus, if you will, partners that are really providing the comprehensive service model for our families in the child care homes. And it's with those relationships that we're able to do those things. To give you an example, again, having access to the university resources, we have relationship with the College of Optometry. And what the College of Optometry does is actually goes out and does eye exams on all of our kids. And now I'm not talking, your typical, follow eye exam. They're actually dilating the children's eyes, obviously with the parents' permission, but they're doing full eye exams, on our children. And when we first began to partner with the College of Optometry, with the first 27 children that they tested, 5 of those children were identified to need glasses. So we know that there was that need, out there for our kids. One of our other good partners from the university is our speech and hearing department. They actually go out and do hearing exams on all of our children. And it's a win-win situation, because the professor is taking the students in audiology out, and the students are getting access to, what they're going to be doing when they graduate from the university. So they're providing those services for us as well. So what we really did was, it wasn't rocket science, and Linda, thank you for those nice comments. It was, just getting the right people in the room, and, again, not recreating the wheel. And, I can't take all the credit for that, obviously. Our initial executive director, Dr. Jane Weekle, who has since retired, it was her vision, and she saw her vision through, and we're just here right now. We're carrying on that vision. To speak a little bit to the pandemic, obviously that impacted all of us. That was something that, came up with all of us, and we weren't really prepared for that. But in the state of Ohio, thankfully, none of our partnering sites had to close down. They had applied for a pandemic license, so they were allowed to stay open and operate, which created, a host of other issues, taking temperatures of children when they're coming into the classroom and making sure that they haven't been exposed to anybody with COVID. And actually, one of our board members, who is from the nursing college here at the university, went out and assisted with partners in the initial phases of implementing those kind of things with our families.
Thank you, Dawn, for that. I think I misspoke when I said last year. I visited the program several years ago, actually, and I remember sitting down with your group of partners and how impressive that really was to see all of those people come together to coordinate and support this program. I remember the food program people were there, just everyone was there. And what a nice effort and a great model for the rest of the country. So Jane's vision and your vision lives on.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Before we move further, just want to remind people that you can put questions in the chat, and we will be taking questions at the end of the panel presentation. So don't forget to do that. Next, I want to turn to Judy Williams, and Judy, again, Judy's bio will be in the chat, but Judy is the Chief Executive Officer of Early Learning Ventures Alliance in Colorado, and she oversees the business development, growth, and expansion of the Early Learning Shared Services model throughout the U.S. This is another one of these partnerships that has just been phenomenal especially during the pandemic. When we interviewed Judy and her staff, it was just amazing what they were able to do against all odds, really. So, Judy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I echo exactly what Dawn said. What you're doing for the partnerships is amazing. We want more of them. They work, and it's amazing. So we are Early Learning Ventures. We are a shared services organization supporting childcare programs in Colorado and across 12 different states. So the way that we approach the Early Head Start Childcare Partnership is we saw this as an opportunity to become a grantee and bring in these resources to then layer over the children being served in a portion of our network. So today we have 350 Early Head Start slots. We have those placed in 42 childcare programs, licensed childcare programs, about half homes, half centers. Our centers run the gamut of small in a strip mall program, all the way up to maybe a faith-based program, and a couple of high school programs that we're in. So we actually layer those slots over the infant toddler that is already being served in that program and on a state subsidy, and then we're able to bring in this boosted tuition to help the providers to do all of the things they need to do. So over a course of a year, there's 350 slots, but they're serving up to 2,500 children. That's their licensed capacity that they can be serving children across those programs. So we are definitely trickling or leveraging those services to touch the entire program. I would say the unique thing when the pandemic hit for us is we're already statewide with our grant. So we're in 6 different counties across Colorado where our partners are. And we have staff on the ground in those communities that are supporting through a shared services model, all of the Head Start standards, from family support to comprehensive services to coaching, et cetera. And we do exactly what Dawn said. We leverage what's in that community to make sure that those services are not being duplicated, but being enhanced by this program. So that's how we approached it. So really a widespread. And so when the pandemic hit, we already had some virtual capacity in terms of the way that we monitor across those programs. So it was, challenging, but we were already a little bit there. So in terms of doing some of the virtual supports, but all of our programs stayed open and continued to serve children, which were essential workers that they were serving. So that was something that I think was really eye-opening to our state when a lot of the other grantees closed down, went virtual. A lot of childcare was closing down. Our programs did not. And a lot of that was the support. We were able to jump in and be able to be that partner with our programs to make sure that they had the things that they needed, the resources they needed, the support that they needed to stay open. So I'm really excited to be on this panel. Thanks so much, Linda.
Well, thank you for that. And it's such an important role you played in Colorado. It was amazing. We're going to now turn to Mindy Zapata from Phoenix, Arizona. Mindy is the director of the Early Head Start and Head Start at Southwestern Human Development in Arizona. She's worked with the partnerships and early education for more than 30 years. We have a lot of experience on this panel. It's just amazing to me. So again, Mindy, we'll go ahead and put Mindy's bio in the chat and then ask Mindy to take it away.
Thank you, Linda. Our Early Head Start Child Care Partnership project really started when the application came out. We were very motivated to go into some of the deep tracts of poverty that are in Phoenix, Arizona, and we we're serving through these partnerships 112 infants and toddlers, similar to colleagues that have already referenced their projects. We are providing services in small individual LLC childcare sites, as well as in nonprofits that have adjacency to some of the places that I think is unique to what we've done in Phoenix. Is we really saw when we wrote the application for the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Grant was that we really saw the child care as possibly a mechanism where there are adult services being provided that don't always include the early care and education component. And so we targeted homeless families, we targeted homeless veterans in the Phoenix metropolitan area. We have adjacency to a community college. We're at a transitional housing facility, childcare site that serves families that are experiencing domestic violence. And then we went into a apartment community that's operated by the city of Phoenix, where we literally renovated with a partner an apartment unit so that we could really have this idea of like work to care settings for families. And so our experience has been absolutely phenomenal over the last 8 years. We've had many challenges. We've learned so much from our colleagues in this project. We definitely have lifted the access to quality infant toddler care for these really specialized populations and been able to move the high quality childcare availability with the very sometimes transient nature of homelessness and domestic violence occurrence, and veterans trying to re-enter the community. And we've done so with some fabulous partners like the VA here locally in Phoenix. Additionally, the impact of the pandemic taught us a lot more. We really learned, although we have made, I would say, moderate improvements in public policy and quality of access here in Phoenix, one of the things that the pandemic really taught us was how fragile that infrastructure is. Even though we've made some improvements, it's still pretty fragile. And so we really identified with our partners the opportunity to expand our business leadership, coaching opportunities. We helped, I think Eric highlighted some of this, we helped our colleagues in the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership settings to access some of the grants that the pandemic funds to, and then helping them think about how to use those funds to address wages, to address credentials, and to retain, sustain, and engage new professionals as we've all experienced so much turnover in the workforce. So really have had quite a journey during the pandemic and look forward to these discussions today because this work is so important to what's happening for infants and toddlers across this country. Thanks, Linda.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you a lot. Next, we're going to move on to Colleen Bosch. Colleen is the Early Childhood Director at Montana Aware. She oversees the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership and home visiting services there and has specialized in infant and toddler care, and I think also in the mental health realm, and which was such a challenge for a lot of people during the pandemic. And I think Colleen can talk a little bit more about some of what they did around the mental health support to families through the partnership. So again, Colleen's bio will be in the chat. So Colleen, we're going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Linda. Aware Early Head Start has 7 service areas across the state of Montana, with about 240 miles from the furthest point of our centers, which created a challenge in and of itself in trying to ensure that we had all of the support services in place for our partners during the pandemic. We currently have 4 childcare providers. 3 of them have been with us since 2015. And I think that for us, it's really important for us to remember from the beginning our commitment to our partners. One of our partners is in a mining community, and so the facility was full of asbestos and lead. We were able to go in right away with the startup grant and help clean that up, which impacted nearly 100 children in total. And I think that partnership, that commitment to that partnership, really solidified the relationship that we had going into the pandemic and even beyond. They really did look to us for that support, look to us for the guidance for the various situations that came up. We have, we're funded for 212 slots, and about a third of those are allocated to our community partners. Our main focus during the pandemic and the months beyond, again, was connection. We wanted to be able to maintain the connection for staff and for parents in such a time of isolation. And so our mental health consultants played a key role in helping us to do that. We have, of the 200, there's about 130 additional children being impacted by the services of the partnership in our childcare partner facilities. And if we think about the stress and the trauma that occurred, that's, I think, the beauty of the partnerships, is that it wasn't just those 40 or 50 children at that time that were receiving our services, but the additional children and the other families that were able to access the resources, the connections that we were providing. I think that during the partnership, what we learned is, we had positives for sure. I think that what we saw is that the relationships between the private pay and the early Head Start parents solidified. There were no differences any longer. We were all in it together. I think that we recognize the necessity to continue to make our partners whole financially during that really difficult time. They weren't sure how they were going to pay their bills initially. They didn't know what payments were going to be coming in. And so by us committing to that, we were able to put some of that stress to rest. I think the other thing that we learned through it is to remember that they're independent business owners. And so there were some of the OHS regulations that were coming into being that really were putting their business in jeopardy to some degree. The mask requirement was one. Many of the private pay families very much objected to the masking. And so we spent a lot of time with our clinicians and all of the families trying to process through their feelings and their reactions. In the end, Montana was one of the injunction states, and so we didn't have to require the masking, but we did have 3 of our partners who said they would end the partnership because of it. And so really trying to remember that sometimes our requirements can put them over the edge in spite of all the support that we're giving them.
Wow. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that conversation there. So we'll come back to that. So our final panelist, and I think a long time dedicated person to early childhood, to Head Start, and to the partnerships across the board, is Gladys Montes. And Gladys has since retired, but agreed to come back and do this with us because her program has been so important and so influential in the Florida area. So Gladys, again, thank you for doing that for us, for agreeing to be a part of this. And I'm going to we're going to put her bio in the chat as well. But Gladys, why don't you explain your experiences during the pandemic and do a little more description of your program?
Thank you, Linda. And again, like all of the other panelists have said, we're so grateful that Head Start has provided us the opportunity with a partnership. This is the opportunity that we had to work with other members of the community over programs in the community, large and small. And for us to be able to create this relationship and to do the scaffolding that programs need in the journey to higher levels of services for infants and toddlers. And I think that that has been an immense, gift that we've given our community during the time since the pandemic, since the partnership was created. Our program is we're servicing 520 children. We have 18 center-based programs working with us and 4 family childcare homes. And I think one of the most important things that we that we have during this time is that we have been able to go to places that we were never able to do before. First of all, United Way is an organization that helps other non-for-profit organizations in our community in many different areas. And this was the first time that United Way had the opportunity to increase the footprint in our community. We did it by partnering with a state-of-the-art shelter, the Lotus Village, and providing an infant and toddler care within the shelter. And the experience has been so immense. We have been able to impact the education of those that are working with the children directly. The conversations with families that are suffering homelessness are so important to the work that we're doing. So it has been immense. The other thing that we were able to do was to partner with schools, public schools that already had Head Start programs, and we provided then the early Head Start portion of it. And what that has done to our families is that they know that when they have a baby, they bring it into the program, and that baby is going to stay in that school until after the elementary school. What a gift to families that are able to develop that relationship and to understand the mechanics of being in the public school, which are hard in a way. And so we expand the services that we're doing to them. In addition to that, I think the opportunities that we had during the pandemic, were so, it's hard to talk about a couple of them only. One of them, we had to create these thinking tanks where the board, the parents, and the staff had to come together to look at the situations that we were facing and what were going to be the strategies that we were going to move forward. It was a very hard time. Things were changing on a daily basis. We were learning more of the things that we needed to do. And in order for everybody to be able to implement all of the mandates that were coming, we needed to provide them with that opportunity for thinking together. The other thing that we did was the increase of the use of the technology, especially for the relationship with families. And some of the strategies that we used with increased technology are now still in place, and we continue to use them. And families are so grateful that we're looking at those areas. The education program for our teachers, thanks to all of the funding that we received, we were able to continue to work with the teachers on our CDA. A lot of our community members that are Spanish speakers, who they depend on that CDA in Spanish and instruction, they were able to continue to have it during the time of the pandemic. And I think that that was very important. The other thing is that, like I said, we have 4 family childcare homes. And I think that the need and the importance of family childcare homes, came to the surface in a big way during the pandemic, because a lot of our families, they lost their jobs, and the only thing that they could do was at very odd hours. And the family childcare homes were the ones that came into the rescue, and they were able to work with the families. They were flexible to receive new children into their homes, not only the ones that they had before. So, these are all of the things that I think really energized us to continue to do the work. And we will continue because, like I said, the lessons are many, and it has been incredible, the experience.
Thank you so much, Gladys. we have a great segue into the first question we really want to ask the panelists, because you each of you alluded to the workforce issues and the teachers and the quality and so forth. And I think sometimes we forget, by the way, that the teachers had every bit as many challenges during COVID as the families and the children. And so I put that out there. But I want to start first with Judy and ask you sort of talk a little bit more about what you do to bring the workforce, to uplift them and increase the credentials and so forth, and a little bit about how that worked during COVID.
Sure. For us in Colorado, when we first got the grant, we worked with up to 32 programs on that first grant. Only 20% of the teachers met the qualifications for early Head Start. When we looked across, and we need about 150 qualified teachers, and about 20% met it. So that was a challenge even before the pandemic, especially since we're statewide, we're in 6 different counties. But it actually was a great opportunity to go in and work with the local community colleges and talk about how we were going to get these qualifications done. We were working with the CDA to use that as a tool to get them qualified, but at the same time, we wanted to create a career ladder. So we wanted that to work with community colleges so that as we were getting teachers through the CDA, that we wanted to actually be able to build on that. So if they choose, they could go on and get associates or a bachelor's degree, which many of our teachers have done over this 8-year period. I would say, again, that during the pandemic, we continue to do that. Today, we have 100% qualified teachers, or they're on a professional development plan to get qualified. I think, again, we were doing a lot of virtual classes and online type things to begin with, just because of the nature of childcare. They work all day, especially home providers. So we had that as a component already built in. It became a stronger component once COVID hit, so that we could continue to do that. I think the other big thing is that we really put our dollars toward retention and completion bonuses. So as teachers were getting that class completed, we were giving retention bonuses to our partners. We were every 6 months they stayed in their position as an early Head Start teacher. They were getting a retention bonus, and we continue that today. And pre-pandemic, we had about an 85% teacher retention rate. Today, it sits a little lower given the pandemic, but it was very motivating to be able to work with our childcare partners to be able to help create that program, fund it, and have a career ladder, have a retention bonus situation. I think one of the other things that came up again, with the CDA, we have a lot of non-English speakers that are teachers, and they're serving their community. And so really working to help them with the classes, but the test taking of the CDA. So our team worked with Council of Professional Recognition to make sure that they could take their testing in their home language, Spanish being one of them. We're still working on Arabic because that is a barrier for some of our teachers. So I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Wow, though 85% retention rate is pretty high. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Congratulations. Okay, let's go to Mindy. And can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing around credentials?
Sure. Similarly, when the pandemic started, we had created an apprenticeship program that had been in existence in our larger Head Start and Early Head Start program that we had offered through like a shared services model to our Early Head Start childcare partners. But very quickly, like we just heard from Judy, we had to move that. It was an in-person interactive with practicum at one of our large educare facilities. And so we had to, really innovate and move to a completely virtual model, but with a strong commitment to still have a strong practicum component. And so we added faculty, CDA faculty that were skilled in, using virtual as a early care and education learning platform. We partnered with, I think you highlighted, Linda, that many of our staff in the early childcare partnership sites were having similar challenges as our families with access to technology. Their apartment complex in Phoenix did not have complimentary or easy access to Wi-Fi. And so we were able to work through a partnership with T-Mobile and a local communication cable company here to have some, even before the benefit of free internet became more readily available for students in the community, we were able to create those partnerships and make that accessible to our practitioners that were working on their CDA credential. And then, like Gladys and Judy highlighted, we deliver the CDA apprenticeship program in 3 languages. We have a resettlement refugee population of Somali CDA Early Head Start Child Care Partnership practitioners. So we make sure that they have faculty that can speak and help them learn about high quality infant toddler care in Somali, Spanish, and obviously in English. And so those were just some of the ways. We also highlighted for our partners a business model of where they could, make that investment of release time during their work hours and how it could happen. So often professionals are released to go home as opposed to making that investment in their higher education. And so we worked with our partners with the business leadership coaching to help them to understand a kind of a cost model that they could allow that time during their work to step out of the classroom to participate in the virtual CDA cohort experience, apprenticeship experience, and how that reinvested into their into the quality experience in their site and resulted in retention when they made that type of investment. That the cost benefit model was very little on cost and very high on benefit to the Early Head Start Child Care partner.
Interesting. Can you say, Mindy, a little bit more about the apprenticeship? You just kind of snuck that word in there, and we're looking at apprenticeships as one model. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do with that?
Well, I think the difference is some of those things that, you have paid time at work to be able to experience the cohort. That's something that sets a CDA program apart or credentialing program apart from apprenticeship. So one of the foundational elements is that it's tied to 14 college credits that are underwritten by training and technical assistance dollars from the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Grant. There's release time during work for that virtual cohort to happen. And then very specific milestones with our faculty along the apprenticeship implementation, where there's on-site observation before the formal CDA, like the observation that has to happen for the council for credentialing through the CDA program, so that they are getting a hybrid model of an in-person apprenticeship support with our faculty that'll come out, and the faculty that can not everything translates so seamlessly to Somali, Spanish. And so we make sure that we have faculty that can help those practitioners learn the parallel of what we're trying to highlight in infant and toddler high quality care in their first language, so that they can translate those practices, which, by the way, we continue through a implementation of a coaching model, which is a research-based coaching model that we really think that we've simplistically called out those practices that we know that when we're doing the class that we're seeing positive outcomes. So I think that's the difference with the apprenticeship. It's tied to a larger organizational model of long-term high quality within the partner sites.
Interesting. One of the original goals of the partnerships was to try and resolve or fix some of the issues around the wages. And we know that the workforce and the challenges of the workforce are tied to the low wages that we have. It's hard to keep people working when you can make more at Target or Walmart or any of the big box stores. So I want to go first to Gladys and have you tell us a little bit more about how you use the partnerships to address the wage gap in the Miami area.
Thank you. One of the things that like all of the panelists have pointed out is that before the partnership, most of the people that were working in the early childhood arena, they were making very, very low wages. So the first thing, even before the pandemic that we had, it was that it was part of the contract that we had with the partners that they were going to increase by a certain percentage every single year, in addition to our COLA and everything that that Head Start was always helping us do. But the pandemic brought wages to a higher level of interest, because we saw the Great Resignation period, and it was not only in the classroom, but it was in the staff that we had that was supporting the work that the centers were doing. And so, aside of our regular wages comparability, we enter into a relationship with an organization that helped us do another assessment of how wages were in our community at the time of the pandemic and what was going on. And we had to immediately reassess our budget and make sure that all dollars that had not been used, because again, the children, there was a little bit of interruption of services, or because we were doing things in a different way, that we were able to shift those dollars and then plan ahead on how those changes in our budget were going to affect every year after. So, it was very important for us. It was one of the areas that helped us increase the salaries of the teacher to match the cost of living in Miami, which right now is at a 9.9%. And that was affecting us a lot. Then the other thing that was happening is that sometimes we think of Head Start only about the impact that we have on our families and our program, but thinking about everything that we had to do in order to increase the wages, the impact that it had even on our parent organization on United Way, which they had to look at the wages of those that were working in the organization and the ripple effects of the work that we were doing, and sort of like following the same kind of pattern that we did for the teachers at our program, how they went in and they did. And like that, we can talk about many of the organizations who have a relationship with United Way that enter into the same processes. So, you think about only a small impact, but then you look at, all of the other organizations that are working with us. Another thing that we had is that prior to the pandemic, and I don't know if this is only about Miami, but we tend to send teachers to training, even on Saturdays, maybe at night. And we think that we're providing the knowledge. We don't need to provide pay for time. And thinking about the importance of that, any time that a teacher is engaged in an activity that has to do either with their personal growth, but at the end of it, it's our families and us that are benefiting from it, that time needs to be paid. So immediately went back to all of our training plans and make sure that budgets, again, were moved and the dollars were available. So for every training that teachers had outside of the work time, that they were going to receive pay for it. And that sort of like, brought them a different kind of way of looking at how we were doing. Like others in the call, we did a lot of bonuses for teachers, hiring bonuses, retention bonuses, longevity bonuses as well. So we actually started really, really looking at how much a person can do with this salary and how many more things can we do to help them increase the salaries that we're making. I can tell you that our turnover has decreased by more than 30%, and for us it was incredible, and that we are being able to attract staff now because they're looking not only at what they get paid, but we have been able to articulate other dollars that are added to the salary that they receive, so they can actually understand the benefits of being part of the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership program.
Wow, that is amazing. I think I've heard a lot in terms of, the spillover. We talk a lot about, other children benefiting who are not directly enrolled in Early Head Start, but I have not heard other staff outside of the organization, for example, in United Way. That's pretty interesting. That's amazing. Okay, Dawn, can you talk a little bit about your organization and sort of what your partners did to address the wage issue?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the wage issue obviously is always a work in progress. And I think what I mean by that is when you're working with the partnership programs, again, we want to go in and we want to help them increase their wages. But again, a lot of our partners, they may only have 2 Early Head Start classrooms in their facility. So they want to be equitable, if you will, and sustainable for the rest of their staff. So to give early Head Start folks, increase their wages, they want to be able to increase the wages of their other staff as well. So that's what we continue to work on at this point. I mean, with the money that came down from the American Rescue Plan, we were able to, provide some retention bonuses, for some staff, in actually looking at how we can get them to increase their wages is really what we're going to be working on this next year. How can it be equitable? And in a lot of our partners, they partner with us in early Head Start, but they also partner with a local grantee for their Head Start slots as well. And so, they were able to provide for their Head Start staff retention bonuses, along with our early Head Start dollars, providing retention bonuses for their staff as well. And really, Linda, I think the other thing that we've kind of discovered, if we could replicate this, we have two of our partnering centers where, we always want to look at the wages, which is very important, for what folks make, but it's really the culture of the center. We have some folks that work at, let's say, I'll give you an example of one of our centers where they have a really family culture. The folks are not making a lot of money, but they still continue to stay. And a lot of it is, their buy-in to the owners of the program. They support them in other ways than, say, monetarily. And they took a cruise this year together. They paid for all of their staff to go on, and all of their staff are together, and do that. So if we could replicate some of those kind of things and having that culture in that center where people like to come to work, they enjoy coming to work, they see the benefits of coming to work, and what they're doing, they see, with the kids and, and the families. But the wages is again, that's one of those areas that, because it's got to be sustainable, the sustainability for our folks. And as we know, the publicly funded childcare dollars that they receive aren't paying for those services. So when they're married with, say, other services, it gives them a little more bang for their buck.
It is about more than just wages, although wages are so low, they're such a critical piece of what we need to address. But there is the cultural aspect of what you're describing and the benefits. I think people often don't understand the importance of benefits, health benefits, to the staff. Some of them are young parents with children that need these things. I want to just go finally to Colleen, because I know when we interviewed you, you talked a little bit about the wage issue in Montana and the competition with the big box stores. Can you say a little bit more about sort of what that looked like in the work you guys do?
Sure. We have one of our counties is the most expensive county, the second most expensive county in the state. And so we really struggled to compete with the wages of the fast food or the retail businesses. And we still are struggling with that, to be honest. But what we did, first of all, we hired an in-house CDA trainer so that they could access it much more easily and hopefully obtain their CDA much more quickly. And then with the CDA completion, we put some bonuses in place for them. We also we use our grant funding to provide for the costs of whatever the partners may be experiencing related to the wages or the training, such as time off for their staff, sub coverage, overtime, travel costs that they might need in order to get to another community for training. We also really started advocating at the state level and then working with our partners to increase the quality of the services within their environments in order to receive higher state quality improvement ratings, which increased their payments then from the state. So that helped as well. We also budget in an amount every year to provide incentive dollars for longevity, for retention, the staff hiring bonuses, They can put some of that money towards their staff retirement if they would like to. Some of ours are family owned, and so that's what they have no benefits as a family owned group facility. So they put that into their retirement. And so really trying to be creative around other things we could do other than just increasing the hourly wage. Because we also ran into some of our partners as they did increase, then their staff were losing some of the benefits like the state scholarship subsidies for childcare. So we had to be kind of creative as we worked around that piece of it. And then working with our partners to continue to develop their budget plans, their business plans, to include annual increases as they can. I think we're also very sensitive to that sustainability issue and not requiring them to increase in the event, because they're a little bit nervous in the event that something should happen to the partnership. How would they sustain those payments?
Thank you. Great information from everybody. Chantel, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. I know the next piece of this you're extremely interested in, and that is the comprehensive services piece.
Yeah, thanks.
And what we've learned here.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, we know a key tenet of the Head Start model is really ensuring access to services for kids and families beyond early care and education, extending to mental health supports, dental health supports, access to the medical home, enrolling in health insurance, and so on. But given kind of the mental health issues that have been well documented and talked about over the course of the pandemic and still now, I want to start by focusing on mental health in particular. Children's mental health, parents' mental health, providers' mental health. Colleen, let's start with you because that was such a big focus of your work. Can you tell us about how you use the partnerships to address these needs in Montana?
Sure. So I think it's important to note that two of the communities that we currently have services in have very high suicide rates and very limited mental health services in the community. And one of our child care partnership communities is very rural and has no mental health services locally. And so individuals have to travel approximately 65, 70 miles, and sometimes on highways that aren't conducive to travel in the wintertime. And so we were very concerned about how we were going to support them during the shutdown and then the continuing months. And so we have licensed mental health clinicians on our staff. And their role is to be in very much constant contact with our child care partners to provide support to children, to the families, and to the partner staff. And so they immediately went into action providing virtual services during the shutdown and then beyond in order to continue to support the families of staff. They offered virtual open office hours for parents or staff to be able to call in or to Zoom in just as a check-in to be able to talk about what was happening in their world on a particular day. They were also routinely checking in with all of our families and the staff. And then on the other side of it, they were supporting our early Head Start staff with ensuring that they could identify potential mental health concerns for families that may have immediate needs as our support staff were meeting with families. Obviously, the caregiver stress increased with fear. Even the demands of the extra disinfecting, the cleaning, the continued classroom shutdowns because of exposures or new cases, and in some cases, the inability for them to seek medical care for themselves or their children for routine illnesses due to doctors not seeing patients yet, and then, of course, the short staffing that was occurring. So our clinicians very quickly put in reflective consultation for the CCP staff. We wanted to be able to support them with their worries about the children and the families in the classroom, as well as support them with their own fears and stresses for their own families. They were, again, obviously very fearful, especially early on in that pandemic, of being exposed themselves to COVID. And so our clinicians were providing coping strategies that they were able to use and also then able to convey to parents as parents perhaps were expressing concerns over the same or similar things. We also then established a time where every month we brought all of our child care directors or owners together as a group with our clinicians and some of our other support staff, specifically to check on feelings around things that we're just feeling kind of heavy for them. Attempting to maintain that ongoing level of connection, not only with us, but with their peers as the other partners. And then our clinicians were really good at reminding us as management that we needed to acknowledge our staff concerns for their safety. I think that we kind of got into put your heads down and just, force your way through it. And they reminded us we needed to stop and say, yeah, it is scary. We saw an increased level of openness and honesty amongst our partners with each other, especially. They were building very solid relationships across the state. They started supporting one another with strategizing on how to do the job in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of being short-staffed. Our clinicians also spent a tremendous amount of time providing staff education around trauma and what trauma looked like for children and families, helping staff to understand and respond to all of the children. And so again, being able to impact not only the early Head Start children, but the private pay children as well. They were there again, as I said earlier, the mask mandate increased tension. Private pay parents were upset. Our early Head Start parents were upset. And so our clinicians entered into that and started attending meetings, helping to navigate again the feelings and the reactions, identifying resources that were available for emotional support for all of our families, and resources that the child care partners could use with all families. I think that we recognize always before the pandemic even is that many of our own staff members were already experienced stress due to just life circumstances. And that pandemic really seemed to trigger the fight or flight. And so we also put a strong emphasis on planning for strategies to increase protective factors amongst our staff. How could we help them to build their own skills within that piece of it? We also, again, as part of that, increasing the connection and trying to maintain that connection, really started to recognize intentionally the hard work our staff were doing in the classrooms, and trying to help the community also understand what it was like from their perspective to be in the classroom during that time. And I think that just that increased support, that increased understanding and being able to verbalize it, we very much saw our staff were able to cope a little bit better during that time. But our clinicians were pretty instrumental and critical during this entire, for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, really, helping the teachers even return to work when they were struggling with, and families return their children to the centers when they still had those unknowns, when they often didn't have their own childcare yet because of the closures or because of some had just not reopened. And when I say closures, some of them closed permanently. And so their own stresses just of the everyday life, we needed to be able to support with our clinicians.
Thank you, Colleen. Gladys, I'm going to go to you next. Can you talk to us about what you saw over the course of the pandemic and now, and how you use the partnerships in Miami to support mental health?
Pleasure. So, I think that everything that was shared by Colleen happened to, I think, most of us or all of us, and many of the strategies were the same. But I think that one of the things that we did immediately, because we needed to gather data about what was going on in our programs, was that we established and added to our assessments process in the program. We stressed the use of the ACEs so we would understand, the trauma that was happening with the families. We added the parent stress index so we would know how much stress our families were feeling because of all of the things that were around, and be very specific. And we added the Devereaux Adult Resiliency Survey, especially for our teachers. And again, like Colleen was saying before, everybody was feeling tension and everybody was feeling an impact from all of the things that were happening and at different levels. So we said we wanted to gather data and move from the data and then to go ahead and prepare or redesign our mental health program. You know, we increased the visits from our mental health people, the calls to the staff to make sure that they were receiving what they were really needing, and that we were giving them the resources that were more so important to them. We went ahead and we put a strategic training for administrators to develop their leadership skills, because as much as things were happening, you know, it was a really big load on the directors of the programs that they didn't know how to deal with how their staff was feeling and how the families were feeling. And that needed to be, you know, we did it through the training on leadership. We did intensive training on diversity and racial equity, because these were issues that were linked to a lot of the situations that were happening in the community. And so we spent 2 years just working with our staff in that area and giving them the tools and understanding their understanding of what was going on and helping them move forward. For us, some of the dollars that we had that we needed to relocate were to the mental health. We needed to allocate more dollars than what we had in our original budget, because the need was so great and we needed to participate and assist all of our staff, our parents, and the community, because I think that all of these things were a reflection of the whole situation. We increased our partnerships with many organizations like the Diaper Bank, because our parents were in need of things that we were not able to provide to them. So not only did we do the distribution of different items spending on the centers, it would be food, it would be diapers, it would be milk, it would be any of these other things that are so expensive. But we look for other organizations. We increase our collaboration with another of the areas that United Way provides, which is the Center for Financial Stability. And we deployed them so they would be able to speak to those that wanted to talk about their financial situation and how much we could help them and what connections we could do with other organizations in the community to help them do. So I think that it was a comprehensive kind of look of what the situation, the mental health situation was creating, and something that I still think that we're going to have to continue to do a lot of work, because we have a lot of parents who have been able to return to their jobs, but we have parents who lost their job and still they are unable to go back to what they did because, you know, the organizations closed down because of the lack of productivity and all of the things that the pandemic brought to light. So, you know, we have a lot of work still to do.
Thank you so much. You're muted. Thank you so much, Gladys. Some really incredible community-wide work going on. To that point, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask and see if Judy and anyone else can chime in and share with us. You know, today's focus is looking at the local grantees. The previous webinar we had was looking at state early Head Start childcare partnership grantees. I'm curious, Judy, if you could share a little bit about kind of the local state partnership that you all experienced over the course of your time with the grant.
Yeah, so we actually have been able to secure our first Early Head Start grant, get an expansion grant to get up to 350. But what's been really exciting is our state has taken some of those federal stimulus dollars and they're going and invested in expansion for us. So we've got 100 new EHS childcare partnership slots that's going to be expanded over the course of this year. And what's been really unique is we're going to deliver it the same way we do our Early Head Start partnership model, but we have a little more flexibility since it's not being looked at by the federal government. And what we're using it for is to expand our partnerships, bring more providers in, like a boot camp, because there's a lot to learn going from being licensed childcare, especially a home provider, and getting to that place where you're ready to do that. So it's going to allow them to come right in, be able to get all of the resources they need while we do this 100 expansion, as well expand in our current partners around some of those children that are on the verge of not making the income because of different reasons. And so being able to expand to that over income population, that is something we work in some high income areas as well. So that's been really important. I think that for us, that's been super exciting because for the last 8 years, we've been writing grants to funders, trying to get them to expand in this model. And, because we have a large network of childcare providers, we have over 500 childcare providers we support in Colorado and 1,200 across 12 different states. And so really looking at how we can bring this level of resources into these networks so that they can actually get, touch these dollars and build the quality of their programs.
Thank you, Judy. That's so exciting to see when the state comes in and supports the locals and implementation, and y'all added a lot more slots. So that's very exciting. I have one more question for the whole panel. And then if we have a couple minutes, I know we have some questions in the chat, Linda, that we might want to get to. So final question here, we can go in a lightning round, if that makes sense. I'll call on folks. What's your biggest learning and your biggest recommendation for HHS or for Congress or for whoever in really continuing the early Head Start childcare partnerships and hopefully growing them? So Mindy, I'm going to go to you first.
So I think the biggest learning from this experience has been the spillover effect. And and then kind of going along with that, the recommendation to HHS would be return on investment due to the spillover effect. There's a cost per child that funds this early Head Start childcare partnership grant nationally, but the residual benefit in the local community and to providers and children that are served throughout that center is immeasurable. So I think that continuing to expand this really great investment in the larger early care and education system is imperative.
Thanks, Mindy. Don, I'll go to you.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we've learned from all of this is, number one, the collaboration works. And I think really the other thing was not to be afraid to ask the question, I guess is what I would say. When we were looking to leverage some of those community partners, I can't tell you how many times we would hear, well, nobody's ever did that before. So we asked the question, and the best example that I can give is with our state Department of Jobs and Family Services. We met with some folks and we asked if we could have a dedicated caseworker that could qualify the families in PFCC, publicly funded childcare, or to troubleshoot for our providers, because it's a challenge sometimes for families to navigate that system. And they looked at us and they said, sure, and we thought sometimes all you have to do is really ask the question. And I think everybody wants to see things be successful, especially when we're talking about infants and toddlers and families. And so I think that was probably our biggest thing. Don't be afraid, to ask. And I would tell the funders in Congress to really take a hard look at the child care partnership programs, because it's not just early Head Start that is benefiting. It's, as Mindy said, it's that spillover. It's all of the kids and families in the programs that are being served.
Gladys, I'll go to you next.
I think that what I would love for it to happen as we move forward is that we continue to grow the program and continue to provide the opportunity for grantees to scaffold these programs that are moving into their journey to go to high quality services for infants and toddlers. The model is so unique, and it gives you the opportunity really to travel these pathways with others. And it's so successful that others that are not in the program, they look at the changes and they notice the changes. And I think that is one of the best ways that we can talk about the effects of quality. We sometimes have a difficult, we can define it, but it's difficult to show others what quality is about. And when the community see the transformation that these centers go through, their staff, all of the things that are happening once they become part of the partnership. And they know that it doesn't matter the size of the program. You can actually apply to the grantee in your area, and you might become a new partner in the process. I think it's very, very important. So I would urge, everybody to make sure that the partnerships grow and that we continue to grow in this mindset. Is this scaffolding of staff as they're getting better, scaffolding of programs as they're changing policies and procedures, and become of higher quality.
Thank you, Gladys. Colleen?
I think that when I think about the increase of inequality, increase in environments and the education level amongst our staff, I think what comes to mind is that all children deserve that. And when I think about what we have done within our facilities to improve all of those areas, it's just such a minute amount of children in the big, big picture. The benefits to all children, I think we need to really focus on that piece of it. I also think that we need to focus on the incredibly hard work our childcare providers do every day, and the value of the work that they do every day. And that that's really what I think I would ask OHS to help us do, is get the word out that what they do is extremely valuable to everyone in our community, from employers to parents to whomever it may be. And we need to start recognizing that. And part of that is increasing and sustaining the wages for them.
And last word over to you, Judy.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my words would be, we need more of this. We have multiple providers waiting to get into this programming with us. And my biggest thing would be, don't be afraid to work with family childcare homes. When we got our first grant and we went to our first training, and we told people that we were going, to be working with family childcare homes, even in our own state, people warned me that's going to be super hard. You're never going to be able to do it. And so we did an evaluation of our first grant, and we have about half homes and half centers, and those home providers got up to the standards much quicker than the center, which I know this panel is not surprised by that, because you've got that vested teacher owner right there, ready to go. And I would just say, work with family childcares. They're fantastic. The improvements that we've been able to do to strengthen their business, as well as give them that professional that we are a business, as well as they've all expanded their programs with being able to hire assistants so that they can take their children. I just think it's been, centers also, but I think what we see is this, we work with licensed childcare, and when we first talked to them about it, they didn't think it was real because they've never been able to touch these dollars or get to these resources. So more of it, and licensed childcare just really deserves to be able to tap into these resources because they are essential for the childcare market.
Thank you so much. Linda, I'm going to hand it over to you to see if we have time for maybe one or two questions from the chat.
I think what we have are several questions, and looking at them that sort of surround the issue of the CDA and the credential and some of the processes on that. And I think, what I was thinking, Chantel, was that we might want to do a follow-up blog to address some of the questions that we got from the audience, because I hate to ask the audience to ask questions and then we can't address them. But these questions are extremely thoughtful and good questions. A question about, sort of how do we support, through the staffing crisis? How do we create a culture where, the employees, to some of the points that Dawn made, several about CDA and the process and the practicality of that. So I think what we probably want to do is some follow-up on this, and between Chantel and Yvette and I think we can take that on and try to get back to the people who were on the webinar, because I would hate to short shrift the answers to these really good questions. So I think with that said, what I want to do is, first of all, start by thanking these amazing panelists. I mean, you guys, my heart goes out to you. My thanks for everything that you have done throughout the pandemic with the partnerships and making these work, because we knew, and I think I speak for Chantel and Yvette on this, we knew when we started these things years ago that they were not going to be easy. That marrying up these two worlds would be a challenge for people. But I think each of you have proven that it can be done. And I think more than anything, that is a message that we want people to understand. And I think on that front, can't say enough about each of your programs and how amazing they are. At the end of the day, you all had one goal. You got there in very different ways. And I think that was the beauty of the partnerships, was allowing people to design a program that allowed the flexibility to get to the end goal, which was quality care for children and families. And I think that you all got there. So thank you. Next, I want to thank Chantel and Eric for all the work that they've done around this at the Children's Equity Project down at ASU. Chantel is nothing if not persistent on this one area. And so she's a champion in your court, and please go and read the reports that she's done. And make sure that we get this message out, that this is an investment that is very worthwhile for this country. And I was very happy to see in the House markup this last week that the partnerships were again called out, not an amount of money, but there is a recognition that they are working. Finally, I want to thank the staff here at BPC, Naledi, Catherine, Olivia, for the work that they've all done around this project. I think between the three organizations, and obviously thank Yvette Sanchez Fuentes for all the work that she has put into this when she was at the Office of Head Start and continues to do. If you can't feel it in the audience, there's a real commitment to this from the people on this call and a lot of people in this country, believing that there is a path forward by looking at the models that have been developed for these partnerships. So with that said and done, we're right on the hour, so it's time to say goodbye. But thank you for tuning in, and we will get back to you with follow-on for this. So thanks to everyone. Have a great day.